want to check what you mean by direct path.
Yes.
Do you mean straight path?
Not necessarily.
This verbiage keeps changing.
Yeah.
Last time we spoke, it was a direct path. So
I
a
think
direct path
was,
instead of doing peripheral between A and B, you would take your 2 points and draw a straight line between
which
them.
is straight
That's
path.
a direct
So like
path.
the shortest
Yes,
pathway.
Central
Yeah.
path is
But
A
it's-
to B through place middle, and peripheral is always peripheral.
but
It's
the way
curved.
Fred was explaining it in how it's a specialized version of straight or direct
Yes, I
path,
understood that because
from
there's
the-
a different plane.
different plane.
That's the key
The
word.
3 planes. It would
Yes.
involve all 3. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key.
Here's a
Context
definition
changes.
that,
Yeah.
that
Understood, thank you.
is actually in my book, in the notes of my book, and in my notes, not in the main part of it, because people, these definitions are murky, to say the least. But I took this definition, the source of the definition was from Jan Forsick's paper, which a lot of people refer to, and also Peggy Hackney's, what is that called when you have at the end? An appendix of her book on, her BF book. And so this is what I wrote. Another way to categorize paths is in relationship to the kinesphere, the space around a person within his or her reach. And that is the definition I think that people would agree to about what the meaning of kinesphere is. Would you say that? Would you say that, Susan?
I'm sorry, say what you said again.
Enough that this whole category in LMA is called approach to kinesphere. Okay, what we're talking
Peggy
about.
calls it that. It's not called that at Lynn's.
Richard calls it that, and Peggy came, and in my programs it was called that. This is why
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. The word kinesphere is important to this whole paradigm. All right, and the way that the concept of kinesphere, and I suspect this is what I read in the way it's explained in your move, is the space around a person within his or her reach. Yes? Okay, so far, so good.
Yes.
Okay. This approach to kinesphere, or whatever term you want to use for it, has 2 components, which we haven't, one we've alluded to so far and one in this meeting and the other we haven't. Spatial tensions, are you guys involved with that? Okay, and it's just very murky. Spatial tensions and spatial pathways, all right? There are 3 spatial tension variables. Central tension in which the movement expresses a kinetic chain traveling out from or into the center of the kinesphere, which almost began to seem like what Anne was talking about to me.
Motivating.
It began to occur to me that what you were
initiation.
talking about is what they talk about at LIMS as being spatial tension, but I'm not sure.
Or central initiation.
Well, that's
Which
a
is
different
what we
thing.
used to- well,
But it's a
What is
different
the
thing.
what is the
Again,
difference
that's
between what you
something
just
to add
said
here.
and a central initiated,
All right,
centrally initiated
you
movement?
can do spatial, the idea of CPT is what it's called, tension, CPT pathways, and CPT initiation, or led by, which is also kind of mixed up at LIMS. Those can all be mixed and matched. They're different ideas and they can all be mixed and matched in different ways. Am I
Can you
giving a
demonstrate?
Yes, let me,
And then
so,
back to me at some point.
let's go back to Anne at this point, because this is long and seems like I don't want to go off on a different tangent. You go forward now.
First of all, I don't know what spatial tension means.
Right.
Okay, so that's my ignorance. Secondly, we had some time ago deep discussions about the use of the term direct path
Oh, okay.
versus straight path.
This is different.
And what we came up with is, if my arm is up and it is going to go down, and especially if you do it quickly, you do that. Slow motion. I am not doing this. But because of the body, there will be a certain curve from here to there. I don't do this. I don't do that. But especially when you do it quickly, you will automatically do the easy way, the natural way.
And
And
that's
we call that the direct path,
in
particularly
LN
from
as well?
one extreme to another.
in LN as well as in motif notation.
No, we don't. That's not what's in our elementary texts.
And what is in the text in LN?
What I said earlier, central path, direct path, peripheral path.
In the textbook?
And this was clarified and changed after all of our numerous discussions. That was the consensus at that time.
So there were further discussions on it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Say again, Ann?
Further discussions on it,
No, this
and the
was,
meaning was
this-
changed?
no, this came up specifically as a discussion because people were using slightly different, using the same words, meaning slightly different meanings. So we actually had a theory meeting, and at the conclusion, that was the consensus.
Could
And
you
so
say it
we
again?
clarified our elementary textbooks to reflect that.
Could you say it again? Just one more time for my slow
Things I
brain.
should know
What
about.
your definition is, what you just said before about how the words are used. Yeah,
Straight path.
and
Central path, irregardless of slow motion or fast, whatever happens in an individual's body also is dependent on how flexible they are, how long muscles are, right?
okay.
So, but the basic definition, the most basic definition of central path is that the free end passes as near as possible for that individual near the point of attachment, center,
of
which is the
the
shoulder.
local kinesphere.
No, don't throw kinespheres into this. This has nothing to do with kinespheres. This is structured notation, this is body.
Okay.
Okay, so you come as close to the point of attachment as is physically possible for you
Mhm.
to go from point A to B. That's what we call a central path. A direct path is that, well, peripheral path, everyone knows, is on the peripheral. So you're making an arc through space.
Mhm.
If you do not want to make an arc, you want to go more directly in a straight line from A to B. We call that a direct path. So instead of arcing from here to here, instead of making the whole arc, you bend as much as little or as much as necessary to make a straight line between the 2 points.
So it's a straight path.
And that's called when we're talking about pathways in LMA, that's a transverse pathway.
Well, maybe not, because we're not we're not talking about changing of planes.
But I'm talking about at limbs now, at limbs
Yes, we
or
understand
in-
that.
Was
You were
earlier.
asking what we used it as. You were asking me to define what we
Right.
used it as.
I know, but what I'm saying is
Saying,
just
clarifying what they're
clarifying the use of this terminology, the different use of the terminology, and so a central path is what is called using our mapping thing, a central pathway in the LMA community, and correct me if I'm wrong, is what is called a central pathway in LN, right? Am I right? Am I right? Is that right?
Except it's not, if I understood her correctly,
Go
was
somewhere else,
language
right?
in terms of a point of attachment.
She's
Textbook,
talking
right.
about a
But in
local
LMA, it's
kines-
in the the center of the
See, I think you
kinesphere.
even changed
Oh,
it
that's
in
true.
here.
Not a
You're
body.
right. Frederic is
connection.
right.
Look
Frederic
up
is right.
direct path.
So
Yeah, what's direct path? We've said straight, this, that, and the other, and she was talking about a direct path.
the difference is in LMA and in the LMA, you can talk about the kinesphere of the whole body, but at least in my programs, you could also talk about, in quotes, a local kinesphere. So I'm talking about, I'm talking about, for example, there's a kinesphere around my hand. There's a
That's like body,
kinesphere.
that's like body cross, body, in systems of reference. It's
Well,
like-
not so much. It's about saying, and I'm not
Well,
thinking
you're
about
thinking about it in terms of its own
the point of
kinesphere.
attachment.
But
That's
its own kinesphere, right.
it's the same thing as in structured notation. How
Right.
do I judge? I say this is center.
Put
This
by-
is center.
And you do that by
Okay.
base of body part.
But-
That's your system of reference.
Or
We are in agreement. This is what you also ended up in the 4th edition.
anyway.
Oh, actually,
Can you read the passage?
What does it
Well-
say about direct path?
well, in the index, you have it listed as direct path, but then in your header, you say straight paths.
Oh,
Direct.
so it doesn't.
But in the index, if you look up direct path for gesture, you end up looking, and then here you say straight paths for gestures, but in the index, it's listed
Oh.
under direct path,
So,
which is how we know it.
so the direct path I was demonstrating isn't in there.
Well, you are
Just
calling
using
it a
another
straight
word.
path. You
Right.
say
It-
because
yes.
of the structure of the joints in the body,
I
the
think what you
standard
said-
path.
I think what you said is correct. That
When-
it isn't what you were just talking about. It wasn't differentiated.
When you teach, Mira and May, when you teach elementary correspondence course, because this is, do you use these terminology,
Exactly what Sandra
what Sandra
explained.
said?
Yeah, because it's in
Yeah,
the
we
study
don't
guide.
use the term straight path. We
Yeah.
use
But
the
it should be.
Direct
Straight
path.
path is the correct term for what you are talking about.
But can I make a straight path when I'm moving, doing
No.
a, I make, right, so,
Because we're going by the extremity.
so would that be confusing if you use the word straight path and, aren't we then using the word straight path in two different ways?
Yeah, straight
central
meaning
path and
It's-
Well, a
Yeah.
straight path is
Is-
wherever your points are.
going from that
You
point to
go
that
on
point.
a
On
straight
a straight
Right.
line.
Right, so a central path can be on a straight path, but cannot be on a central, on a curved path. Is that right? A peripheral path is most likely, we're saying, on a
You
curved
see, I
path,
think
but can it be on a
In the
straight
text,
path?
we don't talk about central paths and peripheral
Yes, you do.
paths.
You do have central path. And that's exactly
Right,
that,
okay.
or the lake, or whatever.
Right.
But also, another reference to direct paths in here earlier on is, and again, you're using, I'm just stating a fact, you're using also yet a different term, because you do say that the movement follows a transversal path. So in effect, in the first example, you're calling it a transversal path. The second time you have an illustration, it's called a straight path, and in the index, it's called direct path.
And what does it say a transversal path is?
She doesn't say, she just says it's a transversal path, but it's what we would call a direct
Direct
path
path,
or straight
straight
path.
So the word transverse is beginning, maybe
Well,
that's where
It
non-
just means cutting through the center.
Right, cutting through the
and maybe
center.
that's where Lynn's
Of the
got that
kinesphere.
term.
Yeah.
Well, no, I
But
think
I'm
Lim's
just
got
stating
the
that-
term from Croydix, I believe.
Or from Croydix.
Croydix, where it had a very distinct meaning, and then it may have evolved after that to have additional uses.
Well, if you're strictly talking about a transversal, then you're talking about going from corner of one plane to the corner of another plane crossing to the third plane. If you're talking about
Transversal.
moving transversely, then you're
Right.
talking about between the center and the periphery
Of your
around the
body as a
body.
whole,
That's
of
those
your
are the
center.
two.
Sure.